I am personally very proud of two things. One, that the mayor partnered with us and allowed us to be part of his breakfast series. And the second fact that we're really got great crowds of people, and more this has grown. So I thank you all for coming. I think it's an amazingly important topic. I think our capital city needs the support of everybody here, and clearly the leadership of Mayor Jackson is what's driving it.
A little too early for me to consume this. I'll be crazy by the end of the day. Jeff, thank you so very much. Peter, it is such a pleasure again, Princeton Regional Chamber, to be with you, our friends. I'm delighted about the work that's going on in Trenton, and I'm delighted to be here with you on this morning. My remarks are going to be brief because we have a great keynote speaker that I want to learn from, and we have a great panel that I'm sure you all came to hear as well. But there's great work going on in Trenton, and that work happens, and Peter and I were just sharing a little bit about it. That comes from leadership, comes from building collaborations, it comes from trust. And we, Bill has been 3 years already, July 1st, 3 years in office, and truthfully, John, it seems a whole lot longer than that on certain days. But as many of you know, real work, real transformation takes hard work, and it means that leadership has to give up themselves and build relationships. And I'm proud of really all of the relationships that I've had the opportunity to build in my 3 years as the mayor of our capital city. But there's one most importantly that I'm really proud of, and there's so many that I could name. But quick history, Trenton was a city that leadership had been broken, trust in government had been taken away, and state leadership said, I won't speak to the leaders in Trenton. By deliberate action, we began to heal that relationship, working with the governor and working with his cabinet and leaders. And over the last 5 weeks, we've seen some of the fruit of those conversations, because relationships really do matter. About 4 weeks ago now, the governor announced $11.5 million for the city of Trenton for demolition work to take down approximately 500 homes that needed to be demolished. Right after that, he talked about putting in money to increase our lighting, put up CCTV cameras across our city. As just heard, $2 million from the DEP to do major improvements and enhancements in our historic Cadwater Park, make it a better place to play, for walking paths, for our children, for a destination point for all to enjoy. And just recently, the governor and I announced approximately $18 million project that will create a pedestrian bridge and a park named the Trenton Falls Park that will allow us to get closer to one of the greatest assets that our capital city has, the Delaware River. I bring that up because relationships like I have here with a lot of you sometimes takes time to work through, but it's that real work that when you stay at it, and there's a level of trust that we both can count on, helps us yield results that the city of Trenton is having. I'm happy to announce that the Roebling Loss has moved from its infancy stages to nearing completion of its first phase, which is a $43 million project, into now taking leases and almost through with their first phase of their leases. Lamberton Green off of Strawberry Street, I would bet probably 80% of you believe that's in Lawrenceville. Nah, that's in the capital city. Building condo apartments, they are absolutely beautiful. They're in the lease phase and doing extremely well. We recently closed on the dormant Bell Telephone building in Trenton. Now we'll have that under contract through a developer that has been quietly assembling properties to do important, impactful, transformational work in our downtown. I would urge you, and I'm going to conclude here, if you haven't stopped into the city of Trenton in a while, stop in and see the wonderful work that's going on in our western part of the city, in our northern, eastern, and even the southern part of our city. You'll be amazed by the work that is going on in the capital city. But we do that work through strong leadership, through having strong integrity, and mainly through strong partnerships with a lot of you in here. So I say welcome this morning. Thank you for, Peter, this breakfast and the work that you do, and I'm excited to hear the speakers, and thank you all so very much.
So Anthony, come on up and let us know what's going on.
Just setting my timer so I know I don't take you guys here forever. So I can literally talk about the city of Camden for the next 7 hours. You may not appreciate that very much. So first off, thank you to the Princeton Chamber of Commerce for inviting me here to be with you. And on behalf of the Board of Directors of Cooper's Ferry Partnership, I want to just thank you for letting us have the opportunity to tell you and take the time to tell you the story of Camden. I am sure that you will find many similarities between Camden and Trenton as I begin this conversation. We share a storied past, both cities, but we also share a very proud past. And I'm a big believer of stories, so I'd like to begin by telling you about the story of Camden and its history. Camden, much like Trenton, was a titan of industry. At its height, it would have 60,000 manufacturing jobs within the city limits alone. It would have enough jobs in the city of Camden that would equal its entire population. So at its very height, there was about 128,000 people living in the city of Camden, and it would have total employment available for about 120,000 people in the city of Camden. That means that every single man, woman, and child could have a job if they so chose. What it really meant was that people were imported into the city of Camden to meet the demands and needs of the manufacturing as well as the day-to-day operations of the city of Camden. It was home to places like RCA, Campbell Soup, New York Shipbuilding, Van Skyver Furniture Factory, Easterbrook Pen, big giants of industry that everyone used at the time. It got its charter because it thought it was going to be in New York City, and then when they couldn't find land, they wound up in the southern part of Camden, New Jersey. This was a prime spot for RCA. RCA held 23 of its 24 manufacturing buildings in the city limits. It was also, Camden at its heyday and height was the place that the top salesperson for RCA was invited to come to for a week's vacation. And it's with that chuckle that I'm able to kind of start to begin the conversation about Campbell Soup, and Campbell Soup also had a story dish there. But it's with that conversation we begin the story past of what happened to Camden between 1967 and 1981. In a 13-year time frame, Camden will undergo the largest, fastest, most desperate decline in economic indicators across the entire country. What's fascinating about this is that 1958, Camden will be at its height. It will stay about status quo until 1967. So when many of the riots hit a lot of the cities in the early 60s with the death of Martin Luther King, Camden did not have that. Camden's economy remained stable because the city overall was still doing very well from a manufacturing and job perspective. It was in 1967 New York Shipbuilding has decided to close its doors. It can no longer sustain itself and will lay off 25% of the manufacturing workforce. Within 2 years, in 1969, you will begin to see the first indications of racial tension as well as economic issues starting to climb in the city of Camden. It was in 1969 where there was the first shooting, but did not break up into a full riot. Camden will not have its full riot until 1971. In 1971, the city will go into a full riot, the downtown will burn, and 17% of the population will move out, literally within 2 years. So by 1981, as we kind of move forward, Camden will lose 40,000 people out of its city. We'll just get up and move out of the city of Camden. Also in 1981, the first mayor of Camden will go to jail. In 1981, Camden will be left with only 10,000 manufacturing jobs. And its total employment will be even less than that. It will be the beginning of the crack epidemic that hits most of America and most of its urban centers. It will come with a great amount of deep poverty And in 1981, Camden, for the first time, will not be able to meet its bills and will enter into a structural deficit. And they will go to the state of New Jersey begging for $4 million to be able to keep the lights on. And the state of New Jersey, in response to that $4 million, tells the city, yes, we will give you the $4 million, but you will have to take a new state prison which will be built on your waterfront. If you don't take the state prison voluntarily, we will just take the city over and we'll build the prison anyway. Right around the same time, EPA has, about a couple years prior to this, EPA has come out with the new clean water rules, and a site needs to be selected for the new county-wide sewage treatment center that is sited in the southern part of the city, in one of the communities, in one of the minority-based communities in the southern part of the city, which then wreaks havoc on that particular portion of the central waterfront, because they decided to do the new sewer facility with an open field pit. You can imagine the smells that came from that particular facility at that time. They've done a much better job since then. 1981 proves to be a pretty pinnacle point and a pretty dark time for the city of Camden. And it was about 3 years later that, because of all those issues, that Cooper's Ferry Partnership, my company, was actually created. And it was created by the new mayor at the time, Randy Primus, as well as the state of New Jersey. And the remaining captains of industry that were there, it was the remaining aspects of RCA and Campbell's Soup, which were the only two people really left in the city. RCA will turn its lights out within 3 years after 1984 as they walk out the door, leaving only Campbell's Soup as the remaining industry in the city, as well as some small hospitals. And it was with that we were left with this piece of land on the central waterfront. And the buildings behind you are the old RCA manufacturing buildings, which were being shuttered and closed down at the time. This was 1984, and things didn't look, quite frankly, very happy. It was really a scary time for us. Today, here on the central waterfront, that same area that we just showed you, we are home to about 3 million visitors a year, and we continue to build out as we try to make a connection back to the city of Camden and to the region. Our strategy initially, when we started the work on the central waterfront, was to try to develop inelastic experiences. Remember, everybody from the region understood what was happening in Camden. They knew it implicitly in their bones. They were very upset. They were angry. There was a racial issue here. A lot of people in the suburbs were white, Caucasian. They viewed the city as they were chased out. A lot of minorities in the city felt left behind and disconnected, as if government was just throwing everything that no one else wanted upon them. There's a strong disconnect between these two communities. You have Camden, which is a highly minority population, between Hispanic and Latino, almost 98% of the community falls into one of those two categories. And you have the suburbs immediately outside, which is almost the exact opposite. It was that concentration of poverty, as well as the idea that you're separating these two different ethnic classes, that really created a lot of the issues in Camden that still are there and present today. And it creates for a lot of distrust between the city and the surrounding suburban community. I will argue that I bet you will find similar sentiment towards Trenton. This is really important, because if we don't acknowledge these types of structural issues, we can't get to the root of the issue as we go to develop and move forward. In Camden, New Jersey, what we started doing was working on a pattern to figure out how to build inelastic things so people from the suburbs would be forced to come into the central and downtown parts of Camden. We did it by building entertainment centers, aquariums, baseball stadiums, and doing events that you couldn't experience anyplace else. We tried to build the hospital system out and working with the medical side in creating a regional trauma center. We tried to sit there and figure out how to build world-class education with Rutgers University at the time. These were the opportunities that we saw as ways to make those connections between the city and the rest of the community. Where did we fail? And there were failures. The biggest thing we did, we were successful in making that connection and bringing people into the city and saying, oh wow, there's an experience we can have, and there's success that will come out of that later on. But where we failed was we didn't include the community. The one thing that we tried not to do, we succeeded in doing, and that was we tried to build a waterfront for Camden City that they could be proud of, and instead the neighborhoods saw the central waterfront as something that was built for others, not for them. And that was probably our biggest mistake, because the activities and the way how we went about animating it was not one that was directed at the residents within the city of Camden. We'll touch on that more because we talk about how we go around and fix these things later on as, as time goes on and we learn from our mistakes. But what it did do, though, was show that success was possible in the city of Camden. Because the central waterfront was still surrounded by the same people that the people in the suburbs feared. It was still the same place that everyone thought was different. But yet people were willing to drive into Camden. You started hearing people say, oh, well, Camden, really dangerous place, very scary place. Oh, but the waterfront, that's different. And so our question became, how do we translate that out? And we did it by trying to build other industry into the city of Camden. But the reality was, trying to get other companies to come to the city of Camden was an extremely difficult and uphill task. Because we just walked through all the reasons why Camden was not necessarily a great place to move. So we pushed for the Economic Opportunity Act. And I want to highlight this because I think this is a fairly misunderstood piece of legislation in many respects, and it sometimes receives a lot of criticism. But if you're trying to convince a corporation like yourselves to move to the city of Camden, and I just told you that we were the most dangerous, the poorest, the least educated, and a city that's basically falling apart and can't hold its own, why would you ever move your corporation there? You wouldn't. I don't care how much money I give you. You're not going to move your company there. And in fact, that was the real story behind this, is that we realized that we needed something to at least get you to pay attention to the city of Camden for a second. For a quick second, we wanted you to stop and say to yourself, wait a second, can we look at Camden City? So the Economic Opportunity Act was our path forward to provide enough incentive that you at least had to put it on your list of evaluations in saying, I can at least check the box and say I looked there, we decided not to go there for other reasons. We had a bet that because of what we were doing in the city of Camden, that once you took that look, you would be able to make the next step and next connection and connect with us in the city of Camden, and you would choose to move there. The other reason why the Economic Opportunity Act was important to us is because up until this point, legislatively, when you look at the incentives across the state of New Jersey, we were getting our rear kicked by Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. Why? Because our incentives, we were trying to come up with an incentive package for the state of New Jersey that was one size fits all. But the state of New Jersey is really the subset of two larger regional economies. One is the New York metropolitan market and the other is the Philadelphia metropolitan market. And if you're trying to compete against the New York metropolitan market and you live in Jersey City or in your northern part of the state, it's fairly easy because the New York rates are so much higher that you can be cheaper than New York and still be able to build brand new buildings and make them sustainable. Well, in Philadelphia, at the time, over the last 5 or 6 years, the average rental rate for a Class A office space in the city of Philadelphia was running around $25 a square foot. Well, if I wanted to build a brand new building in Camden, New Jersey, across the river, we had to charge about $25 a square foot. That's the cost of construction, just to make it break even. So you have this choice. Do I go to Philadelphia and build a brand new office building or be a part or go into a lease in a Class A office building surrounded by all the opportunities they have in Philadelphia, or to go to Camden, New Jersey? That was the decision that we were facing people with. They wouldn't even consider us. There wasn't a reason to look. And that's what the EOA enabled us to do. So what did we do with that? Well, the EOA enabled us to actually start with Liberty Property Trust, which is bringing about $1 billion worth of development to the central waterfront, including our first hotel in actually 50 years. It's also, American Water is now under construction as their national headquarters, as well as a number of other facilities that are now starting to come in. We're also working with Brandywine, a new Subaru headquarters out by Campbell's Soup, and building a new office park out there. And we also were successful in landing the Philadelphia 76ers. So it's an important industry that is being developed in the southern part. And they're also working on some other new technology called micro-reactors and a couple of other things that, hopefully will come to fruition and make all of our lives much easier when it comes to electricity. It's also contemporary graphics, Acetega, resin tech. All of these industries that I'm mentioning are all being built not in the downtown, not on the central waterfront, but they're being built in what were all but forgotten industrial areas of the city. Old areas that now are being repopulated, areas that are within walking distance of people's homes, areas where, and these are jobs that people from the city of Camden today can obtain. When we looked at the number of jobs and who we were attracting under the EOA, we realized early on that we can't be linear in this thought process. We not only have to attract corporations that will provide the jobs of tomorrow, the Subarus of the world, the Webamaxes, the American Waters, but we also need to provide jobs that will provide people with jobs for today, which includes our contemporary graphics, our whole techs, our acetegas, and our resin techs, which are advanced manufacturers, a little bit of career training you can take a look at and get involved in as a local resident. So I just kind of mentioned to you that the reason why people come to cities is not because of economic incentives. So why are they coming to Camden? Because all I've mentioned to you is the economic incentives, and then I said all these things, great things came. Well, it's because once we actually had their attention with the Economic Opportunity Act, we were now finally able to tell our story. Very similar to how I will tell that story to you right now. And it's one that starts years before the Economic Opportunity Act. One that took a lot of planning and effort and dedication by a number of people. And so when we talk about why people need to move to the city of Camden, we had to first start with, what do they know about the city of Camden? So you type in a simple Google search and you see it pops up, city of Camden, most dangerous, you know, all these things that just aren't really nice. But that's your Camden. That is not the Camden that I know. It's the Camden I recognize. I grew up in the suburbs of Camden, New Jersey. I lived there my entire life. The first time I set foot in the city of Camden was when I interviewed for this job as a project manager in 1999. There was no reason for me to go to the city of Camden. I didn't think of it as a place to go unless I wanted to get in trouble or hurt. I know that's how many people in the region around me think because I thought it. A year later, after taking this job at Cooper's Ferry, I will buy a house and move to the city of Camden. It will be the best experience of my life. Because for the first time I actually met and understood what a true community was about. What it means to know all the neighbors on your block and the surrounding 4 or 5 blocks around it. And it was then that I realized that we were telling a story about Camden, about how a few people in the city were holding the rest of the city hostage. And we needed to change that. So how do we go about changing that? Well, for us in Camden, it came in the form of leadership, namely the mayor. When Mayor Red came to office, she was by far the single largest changing force that could have impacted our city in the last 30 or 40 years. She was a resident of the city. She grew up in the city. She enters the city of Camden on day one with a structural deficit of about $50 million. She has a city finance department that the auditors said the books were unauditable. She has no bonding capacity. And the bonding rating agencies classify the city as junk bonds. The city of Camden is labeled the poorest city in America at the time, with a household, not an individual, but a household income of $20,000 a year. And on top of all that, the city is consistently being labeled the most dangerous city in America. She left a position in the state senate in order to become mayor of that. I couldn't thank her enough for taking that opportunity and that leap of faith. And she was able to work with 2 gentlemen who, whether you like them or not, I'm talking about the governor, actually did a lot for the city of Camden and were very influential, also in this story that will take shape. She was able to effectively work with the Republican administration to come up with a solution and success forward for the city of Camden. And I have to give the governor credit on this. What he did for the city of Camden during these years was absolutely remarkable. And the same thing for Congressman Donald Norcross, who at the time was in the state senate and saw the path forward for the Economic Opportunity Act and why it was important when it was important. But let's start with crime. The mayor, I just told you, came into the city and she's under the most dangerous city. She has to cut this deficit. She has to figure out how to balance the budget. And so she starts by cutting a lot of different programs across the city. She goes to all the different departments and says, I need you to cut your departments by half. Everyone figures out how to work along except for the police department, who turns around with a chant, no givebacks, no layoffs. She's like, I need change in the work rules. No one wants to change the work rules. She goes, I absolutely need it. You don't understand. We're the most dangerous city, and I don't have the budget in order to make the payments. Yeah, well, that's great. You can cut elsewhere, but you can't cut us because we're the most dangerous city in America. You know something? That's exactly why I can cut you. It's because we're the most dangerous city in America. Where are we going to go? And so she lays off half the police department. And she's trying to get concessions from them to figure out how to work forward. They will not concede. Crime spikes in the city of Camden. And as much as crime spiked in the city of Camden during this period of time, it will not reach the point that it reached in the early 90s and in the early 80s. In fact, crime will still remain about half of what it was in the 80s and 90s in the city of Camden, despite her laying off half the police force. She continues on fighting this battle. Finally, she goes to the police department and says, look, if you don't help me out in coming up with a solution for this, I'm going to have to disband the police department and go with a county-run metro. They say you're bluffing. She disbands the police department. And they now have a county-run metro. What's interesting about that is Chief Thompson was selected to lead the new metro department. Today, he is actually one of the most sought-after chiefs in the country, and he's working with the police chiefs from New York City, Ferguson, and others across the city to learn how to retrain police forces to work in urban centers, to rebuild the trust between a community and its police force, something that across this country has started to deteriorate pretty rapidly, but something that is absolutely important if you're going to make a city safe. He will tell you that the first thing he did was he stopped sending the paddy wagon out to go around and pick people up across the city of Camden and bring them back for a roughing and a discussion about what they knew. Instead, that was replaced with a paddy wagon that would drop off police officers for a 12-hour shift in the neighborhood to walk a beat. They wanted to go to the bathroom, they better make a friend. And that was how it was. And that's the solution he goes forward with. He goes, after a murder or a crime that happens in the city of Camden, I don't respond by putting more police officers with guns in the street. I'll send out an ice cream truck. I'll send out people with basketball. I will have a conversation about how to engage the community in a way that is positive, because I will get more tips from having a positive conversation with somebody than I ever will by trying to show them with a threat of force. And I have to say, despite the efforts, it is, and not despite, but through his hard efforts, he is making significant progress. Crime is down about 40 to 50% across the city in all categories. Murder this year, so far this year, we've had only 8 murders. 5 years ago, we had 72. So it's a significant change in the amount and what we're talking about in crime. It's a dramatic overnight change. For the first time, we are talking to people in North Camden who are saying, I can let my kids out and play on the street outside of my front door. This is critical, because when we talk to businesses about where their employees are going to come from, they first need to know that their employees are going to be safe. Because I can give them all the money in the world, but if they don't think their employees are going to be safe and they don't think they can hire employees because they're afraid for their safety, they will not move to the city of Camden. And so number 1 was crime. And how do we address it? And part of this was a conversation. And many of the things that the mayor from Trenton just said to you about the closed circuit cameras and all the different technologies being deployed as a force multiplier, that's what they did in Camden, New Jersey. They have shot spotter, they have the cameras, all these different technologies that are used to act as force multipliers. But it's also the change in the theory of policing itself is just as important. And so, whereas most of the time when someone is seen with a knife, in Camden, New Jersey, they have it on video. This just happened about 6 or 7 months ago. There was a disturbed individual on Broadway Avenue, one of the main commercial corridors, with a knife out there threatening police officers. He's surrounded by about 3 or 4 police officers. He lunges at them multiple times with his knife. The police officers are basically just creating a barrier around him to keep the public safe, and they follow him for 2 blocks before he finally gives up and just turns over his knife. And it comes to a successful resolution without violence. Those are the efforts and those are the stories we need to start telling. Because the police chief will tell you, they will not have a 100% accuracy rate on this. They will make mistakes. But it's these efforts now that when the mistake is made, the police department will be given the benefit of the doubt. And that is going to be key. But it's not just about the policing. It's also about education. Now, the mayor was part of the Catholic education system, so she knew the importance of where education was. But she also knew that what was happening in Camden, New Jersey was not working for the residents today. And as much as we want to fix the education today, the reality is it's not going to happen overnight. And she wasn't going to let one more kid start that process and be a guinea pig in figuring out how we were going to fix the education system in Camden, because she knows the future of the city relies on whether or not its residents will be educated. So she actually worked with the unions, in the teachers union in the city of Camden, and the unions collectively with the school district helped press for and create the Urban Hope Act, which created Renaissance schools as a pilot in the city of Camden. They established 4 of them. The mayor wasn't going to put all of her eggs in one basket for Camden to see if they would be willing to do this. Basically what a Renaissance school is, it's a charter school that works within a public catchment area. And so you as a parent have a choice. Can I send my kid to the charter school or the Renaissance school, or to the public school system? If I choose to send to the Renaissance school system within that catchment area, that school has to take my child. They don't have a choice. They get a little more funding as a result of that, but they're still below the 100% funding that every other people gets. The savings goes back to the school district to figure out how it's going to rebuild its school district so that it can kind of pair up and start to educate its kids in a better way. She didn't want to put all the Renaissance schools in one basket, so KIPP, Uncommon, and Mastery are all operating the 3 Renaissance schools and competing against one another in the city of Camden. She did that because those were the 3 top performing charter schools in the country at the time. And so she brought them into the city of Camden. But it's not just about the K-12 system. The other thing that was very important for the state of New Jersey was the Higher Education Realignment Act. Now, many people may not realize this, but New Jersey is the most educated state in the country from a degree per population standpoint. Southern New Jersey, Burlington, Camden, Cumberland, Salem, Cape May, all of those counties are below the national average. So what we have is a really populated, highly populated northern part of the state, or highly populated and educated northern part of the state, and a smaller, uneducated southern portion of the state. And so that created a situation where the educational system for the southern part of the state wasn't able to meet the demands and needs of the population in the southern part of the state. And as a result, most people in the southern part of the state send their kids to Philadelphia or out of state for their educational needs. And Stockton and Rowan, only being colleges, not part of the university system, weren't allowed to grant on their own, determine how they would do master's and doctorate level degrees. They had to get permission from the state universities, NJIT, UMD&J, as well as Rutgers University, if they wanted to develop a master's, because it would be considered competing. So someone like Rowan University, known for engineering, wasn't able to offer a doctorate in engineering because it would compete with the Rutgers engineering program. So in the Realignment Act, Rowan University was given the same status as Rutgers University. And it allowed for greater collaboration and effort. It also established a new medical school in the city of Camden, which was really pushed by Cooper Hospital at the time. There was always a talk and a vision to have a medical school in the city of Camden, but it never was there. Why is that important to have a medical school in Camden, New Jersey? We talk about it, we have one in New Brunswick, and where's the competition? Well, because we talked about the competing regional economies, Philadelphia and New York. Well, Philadelphia's largest economy is medicine. Yet we had no medical assets where the primary training was occurring in the southern part of the state. If you wanted to have your medical training, you had to go to the northern part of the state, into Newark or New Brunswick. Well, once they're up there, they were staying up there and being a part of that economy. They weren't coming back down to the southern region. We needed to figure out a way to capture the largest economy piece of Philadelphia in the southern New Jersey region. And so that's why this particular act was so important to the southern New Jersey area. But it wasn't also that, it was also the fact that we had to figure out a way to train the existing residents who were impoverished and looking for a job and figure out how to get them jobs now in this area. And so for us, it became the Camden Career Initiative. And so the mayor of the city of Camden convinced every single one of the new companies that are moving into the city of Camden as part of their construction, their EOA effort, that they would set aside $100,000 for job training. Specifically in the construction industry, so they would be hired to be able to work on the buildings as they're being built and be put into the unions. In addition to that, there's also additional job training that was going on to actually prepare them for the advanced manufacturing jobs at Holtec in welding, as well as the printing jobs over at Contemporary Graphics and the plastics jobs that are at Resintech. And so that's part of where we're going with the development of this. We had to look at those individuals that were willing to work right now and provide them an opportunity and a path forward to be able to accomplish that. And then the third leg that we talk about is infrastructure. Because it was absolutely key that as we started to rebuild the city of Camden, that we also looked at the infrastructure within the city. Now I'm going to take you for a little loop here, but everyone knows about infrastructure when it comes to roads, sewer, water, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the important pieces. You got to be able to move people around in and out of the city. The city of Camden is actually, right now we're under construction with about $40 million in new road and infrastructure improvements, or just road improvements in the city of Camden. There's about another $200 million going into stormwater management improvements also happening across the city of Camden. This is the downtown portion of the city of Camden. But there are bigger issues that also face the city of Camden, like constant stormwater flooding. Unlike most cities, but I don't think it's different in Trenton, our sewer system is a combined sewer system, meaning that when it floods in the city of Camden, it's not flooding stormwater, it's flooding sewer water. So that's a real big issue for us. And so when you see the stormwater flood out into the parks or into people's homes, this is a real quality of life issue that is also a health issue for the city of Camden. And so we need to address that and take this on a very serious matter. But we don't have the resources as an individual agency like Cooper's Ferry to be able to do this. So we formed an organization called the Camden Collaborative Initiative that we, as Cooper's Ferry, kind of act as the backbone, working with the City of Camden, New Jersey DEP, as well as US EPA. Camden City was not under a DEP declaration decree where we had to separate the sewer system, but we knew it was going to come. And if it did come, the City of Camden did not have the finances to be able to make it work. So we formed this organization where we pulled together a bunch of different regional or local organizations that were all looking at this issue, and we started looking at it collectively. And we started in Bonita Park. Why Bonita Park? Because it was the area of the city that flooded the most. It was the biggest issue for the residents of that neighborhood. It was a 30-year problem. By working together, we were able to pull together 12 different grants from both private corporations as well as public entities to be able to solve the flooding problem in Bonita Park. And it was a great opportunity for us that really showed us the power of working together in a collaborative way. The key, though, to making this work was you needed to have one organization willing to be a backbone and operate the day-to-day operation, but at the same time, not take credit for the initiative as a whole. It is truly a collaboration in that regard. But we also focused on something else, which was absolutely key and critical for us, and in making that connection to the community. And that was the development of our parks. Over the last 4 years, we have spent approximately $15 million rebuilding the park system in the city of Camden. And over the next 5, we're looking at spending about another $40 million in park development. And for us, the parks are key and critical because they touch every single community, and they create a way of life. Many years ago, the theory behind economic development for universities was to build a wall around their campus as high as they could and keep the people around their campus out because they knew some of the urban centers they were in were becoming dangerous. And so they thought by isolating themselves behind a barrier that they would be safer. And what they found was just the opposite, that the more they isolated themselves and the more they retracted inward, the more they became more dangerous to their campus or community and more distrust between the community and themselves. What we figured out was, and universities started to move away from that policy a long time ago, and they've now started to reach out and figure out how to engage. I say that because our residents in our urban centers have done the exact same thing. If I am a mother or a kid or a father, and I have a son or a daughter, I want to keep them safe. And the only way I can keep them safe in an environment like this, in my mind, is I pull inward. I will put bars in my window, I will put bars in my porch, I will move inside, I will slowly move closer and closer inside my house, until the point where I don't come out and interact, because I don't know what lies outside my door. And I'm trapped because I have no place to go, because the job I have or the opportunity that's been dealt me, or where I'm at, or what I've been able to pull off, doesn't enable me to get out. So I retract further inside. It doesn't work. Crime will move to their doorstep. They have given up ground every step of the way. And so our job through parks is to get people back out of their homes and into the community so that they feel safe in that neighborhood and they can help create the safety in it. That requires working with the police department, which, go back to that, is number one. But the police department, as the chief will tell you, cannot make a city safe. It's the partnership with its residents and convincing its residents to be outside and observant and vigilant and willing to talk and communicate that makes it possible. For them to stand up and say, this is not acceptable in my neighborhood. And we do that through the parks, because that's where we're going to pull people out and make that engagement. And we do it because we clean our parks through the Clean and Safe program, which are all local people hired in the city of Camden. One of our employees is a formerly homeless individual. The rest of them are all formerly incarcerated. So every single one of them works in the city of Camden, cleaning the park system and helping out. This is usually their first opportunity once they are released from prison, is an opportunity to give back to the community in which they serve. And so we work very hard and closely with them in making sure we make the area clean and safe. But the other thing we also did was we animated the park system. We had to activate the park system and bring people out. We were building these great parks and no one was using them. They didn't know what to do in them because it wasn't natural for them to come out. So we started doing movie nights and we started doing fireworks and we started doing stuff that called up the culture and the history of the community. We were doing Cam Jam. These were all festivals based around art that we were trying to figure out a way to engage the local community and say, you are important, there is value to you, and there is an opportunity for you to be successful. I remember when I lived in the city of Camden, the question I dreaded most was, where do you live? Inevitably, when you're creating small talk, everyone comes up to you and says, oh, where do you live? And I would respond with Camden, New Jersey. The look of shock, followed by, why? What happened? Is everything okay? The reality is there's an assumption of failure based on your address. Now think about if you're trying to figure out that first job and you're trying to figure out how to get into that first place of business, and that's everyone's initial reaction just based on where you live. It takes really strong people to come out of that. And so we need to change that paradigm. We needed to change that idea and show that the people in Camden are successful and they have something to contribute. And we did it through the arts, and we did it through trying to contribute right here in the park system, in our own backyard. If the people in Camden don't want to live in Camden, how am I ever going to convince anybody else to live in the city of Camden? And so this was the backbone in the beginning of wisdom for us. This is where we started to really make strides. Because if they want to live there, everybody else will want to live there as well. I never go to a tourist destination and say, please show me all the tourist traps. I always go to a place and say, what do the local people do? Where's the really cool food? Where's the really cool arts center? Every one of our urban centers in New Jersey have these enclaves. It's up to us to dig them out and find them and highlight them. And so that is absolutely key.